used to be a team no one feared. That was then. This is now.
First victory of the year on the line. Goff's got it. Back, looks, throws, end zone. Yes! Caught!
You know who we are.
10-5, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions!
And you know where to find us. We won't be far. We'll be on your front porch waiting for you. We are the New Era Lions, and
we are driven by Detroit.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving in. But before we get into the content, I just want to say to all my loyal fans and subscribers that are coming back, thank you all for coming back. It means the world to me. And to those that are tuning in for the very first time, again, want to say thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for devoting some of your time to watching the content. I hope you enjoy it. But even more so, I hope to gain your subscription if I've earned and deserved it. And with that being said, to everybody, I just want to wish you all the best day possible. God bless. And let's get into the show now. So, here's the thing, folks. When we take a look at the Lions and how we have gotten to this point that we are currently at as a team, as an organization, the Lions, their whole foundation as a team has been made by the fact that they are going to do what they think is right to make the team successful. Now, what do I specifically mean by that? What I mean by that is that the Lions are going to follow their own process. They're going to follow what they want to do. They're not going to be influenced. They're not going to be deterred. They're not going to be changing their course based off of what outside opinions, outside thoughts, outside beliefs are. Because realistically, when you think about it, of all the NFL teams that are in the NFL, the Lions are by far and large probably the most prevalent team that I can think of that goes opposite of what would be considered quote-unquote conventional wisdom from NFL analysts and draft writers and opinion writers. Because most people outside of the building, when they've talked about the Lions, have said, oh, the Lions should do this, the Lions should do that, da-da-da-da-da-da. And the Lions have pretty much said, listen, we don't care what people outside of the building are saying. We are going to follow our own method. We are going to follow our process. And if you think about it, the Lions have made a very successful team, a very successful franchise based off of that. Now, how does that come into being? Well, that's because of the Lions' brain trust, which consists primarily of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. Obviously, it consists of other guys like Chris Spielman, obviously the scouts, and a whole bunch of other people. But the two head honchos are Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. Now, if you think about it, because of those two, they have had a vision that they had as soon as they were hired to the job, both GM and head coach. Their vision has been to be like, listen, we are going to find guys that are going to fit this culture that we're building, that are going to fit the ideology of this culture, of this team that we want to have. And you have to think about it. They have stuck to that ideology. They have stuck to that belief, to what they have been looking for, regardless of whether or not the media, analysts, and hell, even sometimes the fans have agreed with their decisions. Because let's be fair and honest here. It's not always been the media. It's not always been the analysts. It has not always been the fans. It has been, in some cases, a conglomeration, a combination, if you will, of all three. Because let's understand something here. Just to put an example out there, there were a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, that disagreed with Brad Holmes' decision for the first two drafts that he had in 2021 and 2022 to not draft a quarterback very high, whether it was in the first round or second round. Pretty much, if you think about it, that was the one thing every single analyst, every single major media outlet, local media outlet, and a lot of fans from the Detroit Lions in 2021 and 2022 wanted Brad Holmes to do above all else. They wanted to see a quarterback drafted. And Brad Holmes pretty much said, no, we're not doing that. That is not what we're looking for. That is not in our plans. Jared Goff is the quarterback. And if you go back to 2021 and 2022, there were a lot of people that thought Brad Holmes was off his rocker. There were a lot of people that thought that Brad Holmes was being too loyal to Jared Goff and that it was going to become a detriment to the Lions. Well, let's understand something here. Brad Holmes seems to have proven what he knows about Jared Goff to be true, because the last 2 years, Jared Goff has been a top 10 quarterback. The last 2 years, the Lions have had 2 straight winning seasons. This year, the Lions win a division crown. This year, the Lions win 2 straight playoff games. This year, the Lions get to the NFC Conference Championship game. That right there ought to prove the fact that Brad Holmes, regardless of what a lot of people outside the building were trying to tell him and their disagreements with his draft process in that regard, he did not care. Another example that I can think of is that there were some people that were upset about the fact that Brad Holmes waited so long in 2021 to decide to draft a wide receiver. A lot of people thought that one of the areas that the Lions had to improve in that draft was wide receiver, and they were kind of upset that Brad Holmes decided to wait until the 4th round to draft a wide receiver. Well, I'm going to say this right now. That decision to wait until the 4th round, I would say that paid off pretty damn well. Now, wouldn't you? I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown is only a top 10, top 5 wide receiver in my opinion. And then if you think about this, let's go to the very last draft that we just had. There were a lot of people that openly questioned and criticized Holmes' decisions and selections of both Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell at picks 12 and 18. Yet, regardless, taking all this into consideration, regardless of the backlash that Brad Holmes has gotten, whether it was not drafting a quarterback in 21 and 22, whether it was because of waiting so late to draft a wide receiver in 2021, whether it was drafting Gibbs and Campbell, Brad Holmes has not given a hoot or hanny, a rat's ass, if you will, about what people have thought about his draft process, what they have thought about his selections. Because the Lions, Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, and everybody else in that building, they trust the process that they're doing. And they're going to go after guys that they want, and they are convicted in their reasons and beliefs as to why they're going after those guys. For them, it's like, listen, there are certain players that we want, and we are going to go after those players regardless of whether or not the media or the fans or anybody else agrees with us. Those are the guys that we want. Now, I'm going to say this. Through the last 3 off seasons, the Lions have proven that not necessarily they're going to go after always the most talented guy. But here's what they have proven they will do. They will always go after the guy that is the best fit for the team, the best fit for the culture. And again, case in point, let's think about this. When Brad Holmes drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown to go back to 2021, what was it? Amon-Ra St. Brown was the, 17th, 18th wide receiver that was taken off the board. If you listen to the analysts, there were supposedly, heavy emphasis on that quotation mark of supposedly, there were supposedly much more talented wide receivers that were in the draft that Brad Holmes could have gotten his hands on. But he decided to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Why? Because Amon-Ra St. Brown was the type of player, the type of guy that he was looking for. He was the best fit for them. And you have to think about it. It's been proven to be true. Take a look at Amon-Ra St. Brown's work ethic. Take a look at his demeanor and how he approaches the game, his professionalism. He is a perfect embodiment, a perfect fit for the grit culture that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have embodied here in Detroit. And you know what? I cannot disagree with Brad Holmes' selection at that point, because let's realistically think about this. Name any other wide receiver in the 2021 NFL Draft that is either equal to or better than Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's going to be kind of a hard argument to manifest because, in my opinion, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the best wide receiver from the 2021 NFL Draft. To me, there is no debate on that. Some people might want to disagree with me, but my personal opinion, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the best wide receiver from that draft class, and it ain't even particularly close. And that is, and to put this whole thing back to what I was trying to talk about, Brad Holmes was not going to let anyone deter him from when he wanted to draft a wide receiver and who he specifically wanted. So regardless of people saying, oh, hey, draft a wide receiver in the 2nd round, 3rd round, Brad Holmes is like, no, I'm going to wait and I'm going to go after this guy because this is the guy that I want. This is the guy that is the best fit for the team. Now, you have to think of some other examples that have been available because you have to think about it. Brad Holmes has had other examples or other instances in the past 2 drafts where there were supposedly better players at certain positions that he drafted, but again, he decided to go with guys that were later on in the draft because they were better fits for the team. Case in point, Kirby Joseph or Malcolm Rodriguez or Ife Melifonwu. You could have made an argument that there were, again, supposedly better guys that were available earlier in the draft. But Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell said, listen, this is a guy that is a fit for what we're looking for. We want this guy in particular. And again, you have to take a look at everything. For those picks, they were brilliant. Because think about it. Kirby Joseph has had some of the most interceptions out of any safety that has come out of college over the last 2 years. Ife Melifonwu has started to pick up and has started to really show promise. Malcolm Rodriguez, as a rookie, was a really good linebacker, and then this year he had to take a step back from that and increase his special teams play, but also got some reps at fullback, so he's showing his position versatility. Now, I know this, to kind of take a little bit of a segue from that point. Some people are going to say, well, David, that's all well and fine and dandy, but, any GM is going to say that their picks, that their guys are what they wanted. They're not going to openly, discredit their picks. Okay, fair enough here. But let's understand something here. Brad Holmes has had 23 draft picks in his first 3 years as GM. 22 of those draft picks that he has selected, they're still on the team, folks. Only one player that Brad Holmes has selected currently is not on the team, and that's Jamar Jefferson. Everybody else, still on the team. And most of them have had some sort of impact or contribution to the team's success. That right there ought to tell you something. Brad Holmes values the guys, wanted the guys that he selected, and they have become a huge part of what makes up this team. Think about it here, folks. There's only 46 players that dress every single Sunday. 22 guys that the Lions have drafted over the last 3 years out of 23 have managed to stay on the roster. That right there ought to tell you how much Brad Holmes values, how much Brad Holmes thinks of those guys that he's drafted, because they have remained with the team for 3 years, going back all the way to 2021. Obviously 2023 just this year, but my point remains the same. Brad Holmes values the guys that he's drafted. Now, another point is that some might assume that Holmes is not as interested per se as in talent versus to compared to fit, because some people are going to be like, well, what are you going after? Are you going more for talent or are you going more for team fit, culture fit? Here's what I'm going to say. Again, I don't necessarily think that this is true. I think Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, they want talented guys, and they have drafted talented players. But you have to understand the dynamic. You have to understand, I would say, the exchange off between the two. They want guys first and foremost that are culture fits, that are fits to the team. But at the same time, they also want guys that are talented as well. But they don't want to sacrifice that fit to the team and culture, because that right there is the main body component of how this team operates. They want guys that are culture fits first, talented second. So, there's that. And you have to think about it. The belief of culture and grit that the Lions have built over the last couple of years, in my opinion, it has further propelled the Lions to get to where they are right now than if they had just drafted or gotten the most talented players possible. Don't believe me? Think about it this way. Take a look at the Dallas Cowboys. Every single year, they always make big splashes in free agency. They always spend lavishly. They get big names in the draft. And yet, what have the Dallas Cowboys done over the last 20 plus years? Absolutely damn nothing when it matters. They have been one of the worst playoff teams in the NFL, always seem to do decently well in the regular season, but when the playoffs show up, they always disappear. Take a look at this other team, also from the NFC East, the Philadelphia Eagles. Go back to 2011. The team that was dubbed the Dream Team by Vince Young was comprised of a literal slew of valuable, talented players and big names. Michael Vick, LaShawn McCoy, Deshaun Jackson, Jason Peters, Asante Samuel, Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie. A lot of big names, a lot of talent. But yet that team that year finished 8-8. My point of the matter is this. You want a team that is a culture fit altogether, first and foremost, and then find guys that are talented that fit that culture. That's what you're looking for. And Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have done that beautifully. And when you think about it, this goes back to a phrase, a term that I have heard multiple times when you're talking about the difference between having a team that is a cultural fit and yet talented versus a talented team that has no culture. Think about this. Hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. The Lions culture is predicated. It starts on everything about the premise that you have to work hard to earn everything that you're given. You do not get anything just based solely on talent. You have to bust your butt. You have to work hard to get everything that you got. And if you think about this whole process that I have laid out here is why I expect that the Lions will again decide that when it comes time to free agency, when it comes time to the draft, they are going to select very, very carefully. They are going to select very, very, how should I say this, with a high scrutiny factor, that they are going to want guys that fit the parameters of team cultural fit first, rather than just finding the most talented guys that are available. Because again, you want guys that are talented, but you want guys that fit the team culture first, because if you have cultural misfits or cancers, that is going to destroy a locker room faster than anything else, and that's going to start causing problems. You want guys that are fits culturally and then talented second. So for me, I know this sounds kind of counterproductive, because we have to understand something here. The Lions desperately need talent in certain specific areas. Pass rush, pass defense. So it's like, okay, you would think that the Lions want to go out and they want to acquire the most talented pieces possible. But we have to understand something here. The Lions' methodology of finding guys that are fits rather than the most talented players available has worked in the past. AKA when we took Jahmyr Gibbs overtaking Jalen Carter. A lot of Lions fans wanted to draft Jalen Carter. I said no, let's go with someone else. And Brad Holmes agreed and decided to go with somebody that I wasn't even thinking of and went with Jahmyr Gibbs. And look at how well that pick has paid off in comparison to Carter. So again, many Lions fans and a lot of analysts are expecting that Brad Holmes is going to go straight out and be like, hey, you know what? Let's draft the best edge rusher that we can get our hands on. Let's draft the best cornerback that we can get our hands on. But I'm just going to put this out there right away. Brad Holmes might just do something that is completely opposite of that, because you have to understand something here. Because of how Brad Holmes has done his previous draft selections, we know this for a fact. He is not going to pigeonhole himself into a certain corner. He is going to select certain types of players regardless of position. Because again, we have heard Brad Holmes say this before. We draft the best player. We draft players. We don't draft positions. So you have to think about this. Brad Holmes might look at a roster and say, okay, this roster is weak in this area, this roster is weak in that area. But I guarantee you this, if he takes a look at a draft board and he's like, oh, I see this guy as a football player, he's the best football player on the board, then I guarantee you this, Brad Holmes will probably consider drafting that guy versus drafting somebody who might not be a cultural fit because of the fact that they are a position of weakness. So what I'm saying here is this. Let's just imagine, hypothetically, that Brad Holmes sees a freaking, another tight end that's a really high draft pick. It's a really great player. Well, we already got a great tight end in Sam Laporta versus having a weak defensive secondary and having no edge rusher opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. If Brad Holmes thinks that tight end is a really great fit for the team and is a really great player, do not be surprised that Brad Holmes might decide to go with that. And I'm just giving that as a hypothetical situation. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. My whole point is this. Brad Holmes will look at what is the best way to improve the team by looking for the best player regardless of what their position is. And again, if you think about this, Brad Holmes has proven that he does not necessarily need a first-round draft pick to get first-round production. Think about this, folks. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4th-round draft pick. Aleem McNeil, 3rd-round draft pick. Kirby Joseph, 3rd-round draft pick. James Houston, 6th-round draft pick. Brad Holmes has found talent in the later rounds that have produced at very high levels. So my whole point is this. Just because Brad Holmes may not draft a cornerback or an edge rusher in the first 2 rounds does not mean that he might not hit on gold in the later rounds like he's done multiple times before. That's why I'm saying Brad Holmes is going to choose guys that fit the Lions mold, whether it's in free agency or in the draft. Period. End of discussion. I know a lot of Lions fans, this one included, would like to see Kool-Aid McKinstry or maybe Jared Verse become, new Lions. But my whole point is this. Brad Holmes may once again throw a surprise to Lions fans and say, listen, I think that this is the better way to go. And it's like, after what we've seen the last 3 years, I have total trust and faith in what Brad Holmes is going to do. I might question it and be like, I don't know. But you know what? I trust what Brad Holmes is doing, because for the last 3 years, Brad Holmes has virtually nailed every single draft, and it has virtually nailed every single draft pick that he's gotten. And on top of that, almost all of those draft picks have some sort of bearance on where this team's success is right now. So regardless of how crazy, bizarre, unprecedented, and unpredictable Brad Holmes and the Lions offseason might be this year, I am going to trust the process. That's my whole point, folks. Trust the process regardless of how crazy or bizarre it might look this year. Because I'm guaranteeing you this, Brad Holmes and the Lions, they got everything well in hand. That's my whole point. Because again, what do we know about Brad Holmes? He's not necessarily looking for the most flashy guys. He's not looking for the souped up, freaking Lamborghinis or whatever else. He's looking for what's reliable. He's looking for what is consistent. He is looking for things that absolutely have everyday value that will always show up. That's what Brad Holmes looks for. But anyway, I think I've done a pretty good job of explaining all that, especially now that we're getting into the off-season. Having all said that, I just want to say thank you all once again for watching another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to watch the next episode. Also encourage you all please to do one of these three things. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Please, please, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. If you subscribed in the past, you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you now had a chance to do so, again, highly encourage you all to subscribe. But make sure you also turn on that bell notification icon as well, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. The more that we get people to push on that notification icon, the more they can come back as soon as I push something out. It really helps out the channel, and I'm ever so much encouraged for the more people that turn on that notification icon. To also help with the channel, I highly encourage y'all, please, share the content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube. Share it on Twitter. Share it on Facebook. Share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. The more we share it, the better the channel grows, the better the channel spreads. And again, it helps me out, and I'm just as thankful for every share as I can get, as well as every subscription that I can get. And with that being said, to everybody, I just want to say thank you once again from the bottom of my heart for watching the content. Thank you all for everything that you do. Hopefully I gained your subscription, and if not, I'll hopefully get you on the next time you pop into the show. But until that time, I just want to say to everybody again, God bless, and until the next time we meet, I'll see you all on the next episode.